February 1959, northern Urals. A wind that bites at your face even through the scarf. Snow that doesn't fall, it hits you. And on an open slope, 9 Soviet hikers, people who knew exactly what they were doing, sleep in a tent staked into the mountain like a promise. The next morning, that promise is broken. The tent is found open, but not open in a normal way. It is found cut open from the inside. And the worst part isn't the cut. The worst part is the footprints, because they can be seen descending toward the forest in a line, like a path deliberately traced, without hurry. As if the tent, their only real shelter, had become a place they could no longer return to. At 30 below zero or worse, leaving your coat behind is not a mistake. It is a death sentence, and even so, they did it. So the question is not why they did it. The question is, what could have forced them out? Today, I'm going to take you through every step of this story, all the way to the point where the mystery stops being a paranormal monster and becomes something more terrifying. A chain of split-second decisions under a threat that almost nobody understands, along with 3 forensic details that still feel impossible. Because Dyatlov is not a story about UFOs. Dyatlov is a story about survival, failing in slow motion. 9 people, 1 night, a cut in fabric, and a life clock that doesn't run in hours. It runs in minutes. We are not talking about a legend with no paper trail. There are diaries, there are photographs, there are case records, there is a route, there is a before, and there is an after. That means the wildest theory does not win here. What wins here is the theory that manages to fit the right pieces together. Piece 1, the tent cut open from the inside. Piece 2, footprints descending toward the forest. Piece 3, bodies scattered, and a group of 4 with injuries that sound like a car crash, but with no crash, no road, and no vehicle. Do you see the paradox? Snow, silence, a mountainside, and injuries from brutal impact. How did those 2 things coexist in the same scene? The exit may have been panic, but rational panic. That exists because there are threats you do not need to see in order to obey them. On a mountain, in winter, inside a tent, the greatest threat is not always what is outside. Sometimes the threat is what is above. And we are not talking about anything mystical. We are talking about a slab of snow. Not a cinematic avalanche, no. A white wall that swallows everything. A slab. A rigid block of compacted snow that, if it shifts or presses against the tent, sends you one crystal clear message. This will be the last thing you ever see. But before we move up to that level, we need a reset. Because to understand Dyatlov, you first have to understand the world in which Dyatlov happens. Rule number 1 for surviving winter. Your shelter is your life. The tent is not comfort. It is retained heat. It is dry clothing. It is orientation. It is the fixed point in a white ocean where everything moves. Rule number 2. Weather doesn't kill you all at once. It defeats you in stages. First, it steals your fingers. Then your coordination. Then your judgment. Then your will. And rule number 3. One bad 60-second decision can cost you the rest of the day and your life. That last night, instead of going down into the forest for natural cover, they camped on an open slope. There were reasons to do it: time, strategy, practice, maintaining altitude. But that choice is the seed. Because on an open slope, the wind does not just chill you. The wind piles up on you. It rearranges the snow. It loads it. It gathers it imperceptibly, in silence. It turns it into a trap with a clock. And this is where the Dyatlov pattern begins. Every answer opens a worse question. If the threat was snow, then why cut from the inside instead of opening the entrance? If it was something pressing on the tent, why walk down to the forest instead of running? If they descended in a controlled way, why were some of them barely clothed? And if it was all an accident, why are there details that look like a violent scene? Let's go step by step. First scene, the tent. Picture it at night. 9 people inside, wind hammering the fabric like an insistent hand. The mountain black as pitch, the slope tilted, the snow accumulating. And suddenly, something changes. Not exactly a roar, not exactly a giant avalanche. It could be pressure, a collapse, a dull sound, the fabric tightening. 1 second, and in that second, your brain starts calculating. If the roof caves in, if the snow comes in, if I get trapped, I'm not getting out. So you do the unthinkable. You cut. You don't open. You cut. Because opening takes time, and time, in that fraction of lucidity, costs air. Cutting from the inside saves you from collapse, but condemns you to the cold. So the decision stops being about living or dying. The decision becomes die now, or die later. Second scene, the descent. The footprints are the image that ruins every simple theory. Because if someone is chasing you, you run. If there is a monster, you run. If there are gunshots, you run. But those footprints descend as if they were obeying a discipline. Move, stay together, reach a stand of trees, make a fire. That does not feel like total chaos. It feels like a desperate plan. And that is the most unsettling part. Maybe they were thinking clearly, and were still doomed. Because the cold does not need you to be insane in order to kill you. It only needs you to be short on minutes. Third scene, the cedar. Beneath a tree appears the most human attempt in the world, a campfire, 2 bodies nearby, broken branches overhead, as if someone had climbed up trying to see something, searching for the tent, searching for a point in the darkness. The fire is an improvised home, a place where the group tries to turn the forest into shelter. If they already had fire, why did some of them leave? Why would anyone try to go back toward the tent? Again, every answer opens a worse question. And this is where we discover another terrifying truth about surviving in these conditions. When the body gets cold, your brain starts to lie. You begin to miscalculate distances, time, direction. What is near becomes far away. What is far away becomes impossible. And if, on top of that, bad luck has you wet, if your clothing is not enough, if the wind cuts through you, hypothermia does not kill you like it does in a movie, under starlight with a few last heroic words. It kills you by making you take decisions that, from a couch, look absurd. Fourth scene, the split. At Dyatlov, the group does not die in a single place. It fragments. And fragmenting in winter is like breaking a flashlight in the dark. You lose the only light you shared. Some seem to try to go back, others stay. Others move in search of materials. And in that movement, the mountain does what mountains do. But what about the detail that fueled decades of theories? The 4 in the ravine. Because months later, when the thaw makes further searching possible, the last 4 are found in a stream bed or ravine area. And their injuries are brutal. Skull, chest, ribs, severe trauma. And in some cases, facial details the internet turned into nightmare fuel. Tongue, eyes, missing. And this is where the monsters are born. Because the human brain sees 2 incompatible things and invents a third. If there is crash-like trauma, there had to be a violent blow. If tissue is missing, there had to be torture. If the case was closed with ambiguous language, there had to be a secret. And yes, Dyatlov has perfect fuel for theories. A Soviet Union that did not explain itself, documents that feel opaque, rumors of military tests, and a closing statement that leaves room. What we know is this: there was an abrupt exit from the tent. There was a descent toward the forest. There was a fire. There were attempts to return. There was a second discovery site with severe injuries. And there was one extra detail that is narrative gold because it is real and at the same time uncomfortable. Radiation readings above background on some items of clothing. That is the kind of detail that keeps you awake, because by itself, it explains nothing. Yet it sounds like the beginning of something enormous. Forced exit and rational panic. Something compromises the tent. A snow slab, wind loading, a small slide. You do not need to be buried to feel that you are seconds away from being trapped. Fragmentation of the group and fatal thermodynamics. They go down to the forest looking for shelter and fire. In the process, they separate. Some go back, others move elsewhere, and hypothermia does the rest. Injuries that seem impossible. Scientific models have proposed that a relatively small slab can generate enough force to cause severe trauma, especially if it strikes or presses in a concentrated way, and that weeks later, the terrain can erase the obvious evidence through wind and fresh snowfall. And this becomes even more unsettling when you really think it through. The mountain may have done everything without leaving an easy signature to read, like nature's perfect crime. But of course, a mystery does not stay alive for 60 years on one explanation alone. It stays alive because of the cracks. Crack A, avalanche. But where is the avalanche? The classic objection says, if it was an avalanche, why didn't the rescuers see a clearly avalanche-swept scene? It did not have to be large. It only had to be enough to scare them and drive their decisions. And over the course of weeks, the wind can remake a slope as if nothing had happened. But even with that, the question stays alive because the viewer wants an image that closes the case. And Dyatlov does not give you that image. Crack B, crash-type injuries without proportionate external evidence. That is the hook that has fed the violent theories. Science tries to close that door by explaining pressure and a snow block. But even then, it feels strange. It feels counterintuitive. And that is where the mystery becomes addictive. Not because there is no explanation, but because the explanation is competing against your intuition. Crack C, the face. The absence of tissues is used as a paranormal flag, but there is a simpler, colder, more real possibility. Post-mortem degradation, water, ice, fauna, weeks of exposure. It is not a sexy answer. It is not a monster. But it is the kind of answer that reminds you that nature is not narrative. Nature is chemistry, and even so, the detail remains an anchor because the image is too strong. Crack D, radiation. This detail is dynamite for the imagination because it sounds like a hidden lab. It sounds like tests. It sounds like secrecy, but it may also have prior, localized explanations connected to earlier exposure or specific garments. The problem is that even if there are plausible explanations, the data exists, and it does not feel comfortable. And Dyatlov lives inside the uncomfortable. And this is where the true final antagonist of this story appears. And no, it is not the weather. It is not the snow. It is not the military. It is information noise. Because Dyatlov is the perfect case where the internet takes a file full of incomplete certainties and fills it with imagination. And the more imagination there is, the harder it becomes to return to the real thread. Decades after '59, the case became global mythology. Then came the modern era. Reopenings, reviews, press coverage, documentaries, expeditions. An official reopening in 2019 and a later official conclusion around 2020, aligned with an explanation centered on an avalanche or slab event and hypothermia as the final outcome. And afterward, science tries to step in with models, simulations, mechanisms. But here is the trick. The existence of a possible explanation does not kill the story. In fact, sometimes it makes it worse. Because if you accept that it was a small slab, then the horror multiplies. 9 experienced people did many things right. And even so, an ambiguous threat pushed them into an impossible decision. And that is the big idea Dyatlov leaves lodged in your mind. The line between panic and rational decision is thinner than you would like to believe. Because on a couch, you can think, I would never go out without clothes. But the reality is that on a slope, with a dull sound above your head, your mind thinks, if I stay, I will be crushed. And you go out. And then you discover that outside, you die too. Even if you accept the slab, even if you accept hypothermia, even if you accept that time and wind rewrote the scene, there are still 3 details that do not fit completely, like a stone inside your shoe. The severe injuries of the 4 in the ravine and their exact pattern. The radiation on specific garments, which demands a concrete history, not just a possibility. And the group's behavior in those minutes, why some go back, why others do not, and at exactly what moment does the survival plan break apart. Because the real mystery of Dyatlov is not in the sky, it is on the ground, in the snow, in the slashed fabric, in the footprints that do not run, and in a night when nature did not need a monster to win. Or, what do you think? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, support the channel by subscribing. That way, we can keep bringing you new mysteries. And tell me, is there a specific story you'd like us to tell for you? Sending you a hug.